This is the moment this channel goes back to its roots. When I was working in publishing, I had to sort of cease and desist with my negative reviews, but no more. Initially, I wanted to do this as a worst books of the last 5 years type of video, but for years I haven't read any bad books. You know why? Self-love comes to some of us later than others. My name is Jennifer, and if you like this type of content from me, this is a one-off, you're out of luck. But as I said, I don't read many terrible books anymore, so instead of confining this to the last 5 years, I went back through the carnage of my early YouTube era Goodreads, and we're gonna go in chronological order of when I read these Elite 21, starting back in good old nothing to see here 2016. I chose 21 because I thought this list should be old enough to drink. Scrolling back through and seeing some of the books I'm willingly bringing back into my life, I will be making myself a G&T after the events of this video. A few rapid fire disclaimers for old time's sake. It's really funny presenting these in list form because they don't at all feel like an accurate representation of the types of books I read now, but these were arguably a big part of the trial and error process that brought me to my current reading preferences. A little preemptive silver lining there. Let's hold on to that when things get bleak. These are a combination of the worst, least enjoyable, least successful, most disappointing, and most irritating books I read in that time, but that would be a dumb YouTube title. So for the record, they're not all technically the worst, they're my worst. And I only say I've read a book if I've read every godforsaken page. Many of these are prize winners, bestsellers, much reviewed and much loved. And this list also includes some of my favorite authors. So if you see a book or an author that you love on here, I say this without irony, they're in good company. Now, I've courted some criticism for my own criticism over the years. Harsh and mean-spirited tend to be the adjectives of choice here. And I get it, you know, we should be grateful, or at least silently ungrateful for bad books, seeing how we all have multiple lives to lead. All right, here we go. We begin fatefully with the Women's Prize shortlist of 2016. It was the first shortlist that I ever read in full. And as you'll see, reading full shortlists, and in some cases full long lists, was a major culprit in me reading a lot of bad books. Okay, given what I'm about to say, this is especially funny, but I did forget to say the name of this book. It's The Improbability of Love by Hannah Rothschild. This had something to do with the world of like London art dealing, but honestly, the first adjective that comes to mind is forgettable. And I was thinking that in between chapters, let alone these many years later. This was one of those minimally clever novels that was relentlessly described as clever. And when the lighthearted romp of a title is the weakest on a shortlist, I don't know, it can perpetuate this idea that fun books aren't as nuanced or as substantive as tragic ones. I feel so strongly that lighthearted doesn't equal lightweight, except when it does. I'm swinging hard early because next is The Lady of the Last Decade, A Little Life by Hanya Yanagihara. She built a glittering city and then destroyed it all, toddler style, demolished her own structures. And meanwhile, people were still looking out and saying how incredible these buildings were. And I was like, what are we talking about? She said to your face, hey, this is rubble now. And you said, I never knew I could be this moved by the wonders of architecture. To be clear, I wouldn't give up having read this extended thought experiment for the world. Literary fiction discourse cannot get past it. And I love that for us. It's garbage human energy and everyone trauma dumping dressed up with the barest hint of intellect. That takes us into 2017 and Jesus wept. There are 9 books from this one year, and I cut out others that I really made a case for their own spots. I tend to think of 2017 as a fantastic reading time for me because of my favorites list from that year, having apparently repressed the full truth of the matter. So number 3 is In Other Words by Jhumpa Lahiri, her memoir about learning Italian. I've been a language teacher and a language learner many times over. I just love thinking about the struggles and intricacies of language learning, and I already loved Lahiri's writing, so I mean, perfect. Like, what could go wrong? Well, I should say that I like that she takes herself and her work seriously. I think authors even a few years younger than Lahiri often struggle with that, but I did feel almost despite myself that this book flirted with the line between cerebral and opaque, and more significantly, humor, a hint of humor, or just levity of any kind, was conspicuously absent. Language learning, like life, is a tragicomedy. But if you were to take it from Lahiri, you'd be like, well, I don't know why I'd learn a language when I could be grave digging and having the same experience. I can't know without having read her full body of work, but it was this book that made me wonder if seriousness to the point of grimness is not just an artistic choice of hers, but maybe also an artistic limitation. Next up is The Shadowlands by Elizabeth Kostova. As somebody who promotes books from East Central Europe myself, the work that Kostova has done to promote Bulgarian literature, my God, it fills me with joy. I just love and appreciate it so much. She makes a difference. I didn't find much to love and appreciate in this book. The main problem is that this has a dull as dishwater protagonist, and we spend so much time with her and her dull ass thoughts. But then, a decent chunk of the way through the book, we get this gorgeous extended historical section. And you know, if you're gonna write so blandly for so much of the book, at least have the decency to let me think you can't do better. Another women's prize shortlist casualty, this one is First Love by Gwendoline Riley. If overthinking were an energy source, we would have been power in cities with this one. It does have the distinction of featuring my favorite literary sentence: fuliginous nooks yielded uncertain streams of piss. I did not have to look that up. I carry it in my heart. Anywhere I go, you go, my dear. At one point, I was listening to a podcast with her then editor, who's an industry standout, and she said that First Love required so little work because so many of the sentences were already perfect. And when I heard that, you know what came to mind? Unbidden. Fuliginous nooks yielded uncertain streams of piss. I guess sometimes there's a comfort in having it confirmed that something wasn't edited. Number 6 is Mr. Rochester by Sarah Shoemaker, aka the Mr. Rochester Apology Tour. The thing is, when you're doing a Jane Eyre pastiche centered on Edward Fairfax Rochester, Jane Reese's wide Sargasso Sea is such an integral part of the discourse surrounding this character that to avoid every inflection of it is a choice. Basically, the goal seemed to be to fashion this man into as sympathetic and at times as anachronistically forward-thinking a character as possible. Although, to be fair, I think a Mr. Rochester condemnation tour would be almost as mind-numbing. Mr. Rochester is a sexist, imperialist. Wow, Brian, it's almost like you read the text. Here she is, my favorite thoroughbred, The Sport of Kings by C.E. Morgan. I wondered if this could possibly be as bad as I remembered it, because most of the people who reviewed the Women's Prize shortlist that year had positive reactions to this one. Maybe I had over-dramatized things. That happened here and there in my younger years. So I rewatched my 2017 review, and the severely anemic version of me had CVS Rewards member length receipts. I was like, damn girl, you're convincing me. You're convincing me. All over again. These excerpts are excruciating. And then it did come back to me forcefully how lofty and grasping this book was, like transparently striving for the great American novel category. And also condescending, so condescending to readers. It's a type of writing that's not infrequently lauded now, and I won't lie, that's a little tough for me. Number 8 is Assassin's Quest by Robin Hobb. I think this is the only one of these I still own. It's the third book in the first trilogy of my favorite series ever. So many books in this series are justifiably and wonderfully 800 plus pages, but I think we can level with ourselves and admit with love and hindsight that this is some kind of a sick test. Can you push through this increasingly tedious book that makes the reading experience akin to trying to finish soup out of a self-refilling soup cauldron to then get to 6 absolute works of art? Robin says, how much pain for how much gain, bitches. Number 9 is one I had forgotten about before my little Goodreads trawl here. It's Heather, the Totality by Matthew Weiner. I realize it's probably beneath me to unearth this novella that has likely already been pulped. It only ever got coverage because of Weiner's work with Mad Men and The Sopranos. We love when genuinely influential people deign to involve themselves in the book world. This is where I struggle. I just can't imagine the mental pole vault it took to put this story on the page and then think to yourself, other people should witness this. At the midway point, we stumble upon Exit West by Mohsin Hamid. And actually, reading it does kind of feel like the mental equivalent of stubbing a toe. The sheer mediocrity of this novel is breathtaking. The scope and ambition of the mediocrity is a kind of artistry in itself, really. Many people whose taste I trust recommended this one, and it's a reminder that we all live in different worlds. Next is a special case. It's Lean In by Sheryl Sandberg. I remember reflexively defending this book at the time because it was a gift to me from someone I loved and whom it impacted. And I didn't want to be that person who considered herself so much more thoughtful than the women in my life who found this meaningful, you know, because I'm not. And at that time, I was just becoming annoyed by lazy privilege policing. I felt like people would read Genesis and be like, Adam and Eve were handed everything, and now they're out here moaning about their expulsion from paradise. How am I supposed to feel sorry for you when I'm over here being middle class? But those factors encouraged me to ignore the fact that, you know, beyond some interesting personal stories of Sandberg's, when she inevitably extrapolates, it's a big yikes. It's such a time capsule, right? This book and its influence encapsulate so many of the qualities of that era. So I guess I might recommend reading it for sociological purposes. We're out of 2017, yay! 2018's first offering is Messages from a Lost World, Europe on the Brink by Stefan Zweig, translated from German by Will Stone. I know, like, name the translator and everything, but I am sorry to bring Will into this. Lord deliver us from public intellectuals posturing beyond their expertise. Someone should have set this man up with a prominent opinion column if this is what we could expect from him. If this was a shining example of 20th century pan-Europeanism, I guess I can see how nationalism appealed. The sun is starting to leave this room, and I think that's appropriate because we've now arrived at the 2018 Women's Prize long list. What a dark era. I don't want to crawl back into the darkness. I'm actually stressed laughing about it. We start Pitch Black with Miss Burma by Charmaine Craig. A strained mother-daughter relationship set during the Burmese Civil War. Like, initially this was one of the most exciting long-listed books. But consider this your definitive primer in how not to write historical fiction. What else is worth saying? I'm invoking Katya on this one. Horrible. 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 Actually, one more thing. I do think it's important that people of all backgrounds have the opportunity to write mediocre books that then get inexplicably praised. I'm not even being facetious here. I'm not saying any of us should lower our individual bars for quality. What I am saying is that publishing has long had, for example, one quality bar for white authors and another for authors of color, and they should be equally low. That's all I'm saying. I don't know if I have the stamina to get into this so late in the video, but if you were waiting for her, here she is. Eleanor Oliphant is Completely Fine by Gail Honeyman. Oh, even just saying that title made my cat sneeze. This contributed to some of my most unpleasant internet interactions when I was a tender young thing, and for that it can fuck right off. Up until recently, I still got fresh, bitter comments on that review. It was like emotional nuclear fission over there. In the thick of it, after posting, I constructed a sort of mental panic room I could go to whenever somebody out in the wild would innocently invoke this book. I can't tell you how many times somebody started telling me vaguely about this book they had really loved. Oh, what was it called? And that's when the hairs started rising on the back of my neck. They would fumble around a little bit. Was it like Ella and like it was an elephant? And that's when I'd help them out. I would say, I mean, I think you're talking about Eleanor Oliphant is Completely Fine. But honestly, this one has enough enjoyable qualities that if I hadn't been lovingly berated over my hot takes, my harumph feelings would have passed even faster than they ultimately did. Let me tell you, that's not the case for the last title from this medieval torture chamber of a long list, and that is 3 Things About Elsie by Joanna Cannon. A while back, a past professor of mine asked for some representative videos for my channel, and for the heck of it, the last one I included was this review. And he wrote back to me gleefully, my brainy, bespectacled professor, and he said, "You drive in the blade ruthlessly, but not sadistically," which I think has epitaph potential. And I've enjoyed books by Frederick Bachman, you know? I'm not completely averse to cutesy, whimsical, warm-hearted tales of wonder, but this is on another level. This is like what if cutesiness were a sledgehammer. By this point, I've made enemies of 97% of you, and this is the moment I lose the remaining 3%, but I'll remember our time fondly. It's The Likeness by Tana French. Okay. Her many fans say, yes, her books are intentionally a slow burn, even to the point of dragging, but the characters and the atmospheres and the quality of the writing pull you in so much that as combination mysteries / police procedurals, they end up being especially satisfying. And I agree with everything up to the but. And because her overwrought, overcrafted, momentum-killing, male-female friendship-destroying books appeal to so many literary fiction readers, anytime you go looking for like a list of literary mysteries, the World Wide Web is like, oh, have you heard of Tana French? And I ask for so little in this life. Can a bitch get one Tana free list? Next on the docket is Victoria the Queen by Julia Baird, the rare nonfiction contender. You know, this was instructive in that it helped me understand the type of biography I didn't enjoy reading, namely the type with passages describing how a young Queen Victoria stood in front of the mirror, fixed her shawl, and sighed because she was thinking about her horse. Was he having a good day? Passages that make you think, hold on, were you there? Did you acquire a time machine and bring along a video camera and also a mind-reading device? What is happening? Crawl into the finish. Number 18 is Take Courage, Anne Bronte and the Art of Life by Samantha Ellis. Okay, this one still annoys me, as opposed to all the others, you might say. But no, I'm proud of the day I sat myself down and shaded this book on camera. Adding elements of memoir to broader factual material can be the making of a book. But in the wrong hands, for the wrong purposes, there's almost nothing more dreadful. I don't know, maybe an expectation of some rigor would improve most non-fiction projects. This was some Charlotte Bronte slander. That's what this was. The disrespect. Just because we're generally more aware now of her various sisterly flaws doesn't mean we actually need a strident overcorrection to Elizabeth Gaskell. Jesus. It pains me to take us more directly to one of my favorite literary periods, but take us there I will, for Tom Tom, Thomas Hardy, and far from the madding crowd. Hang on, I think I also have this one. Yay! Look, it's not that I hate his sentences. His sentences hate me. Of course, this is in no way a bad book. There's a love square, so much drama, class observations, suicidal sheep. But there's only so much you can get out of any book when the line level writing repels you. I'm genuinely sorry about this one. Please don't come for me. We're raging amid the dying of the light here, and the second to last title on this list is the second fantasy book. It's R.F. Kuang's The Poppy War. I was buddy reading this with another booktuber, and she didn't start to question her life choices until about halfway through, but within a few pages, I knew what I was doing to myself. It was published when the author was really young, I think 22, so it seems to be a case of someone publishing a book before they know how to write a book, and I can have compassion for that. I wish I hadn't spent part of my young life on it, but I guess my youth was never at a premium. The funniest thing to me, though, was seeing a number of people online call this one of the best fantasy series ever, which you either need to read more or to stop making charmingly categorical statements. I'm gonna need you to pick one of those and put your back into it. We end in style and blasphemy with A Place of Greater Safety by Dame Hilary Mantel, Her Majesty Hilary Mantel, as far as I'm concerned, and her relentless epic novel of the French Revolution. Epic in the most ominous sense of the term. Wolf Hall is one of my favorite books, so when it came to a pre-existing 700-page Robespierre fest, the buy-in, I was ready. What I wasn't anticipating was a slog, a perplexing slog. It felt like thousands of scenes that were written at random were then assembled into some broadly chronological order. In a weird way, it was kind of like the ungainly historical fiction equivalent of Jenny Awful. I made myself finish this in the last week of December because I couldn't face starting a reading year with an experience this labyrinthine and life-sucking. I was like, Hilary, we were perfect. How could you do this to us? Although it's odd now that she's died so young. I don't know, it upsets me to talk about. And at the time of her death, she was apparently writing a Mary Bennett novel. I need to sit here for a few minutes and think about that. I'm honestly grateful for any amount of pages we have from her. You know, the thousands of pages of unspeakable brilliance. And these 700 pages that are unspeakable. Of all this list, I'm calling it, this is the one most deserving of pushback. Come at me in the comments. It's your collective mission to drown out the Yanagihara people. Well, I think what we can all take from this is that the past is worse than you remember it. It really is. Although I do think some people break their brains through excessive DNFing, the fact that I didn't DNF the majority of these books makes me admire and fear my own strength. But what's oddly nice to reflect on is that I couldn't make a video like this 3, even 5 years from now. I just rarely read books I don't like. What a concept. But seriously, because 20-something me absolutely put herself through it, I'm now much more in touch with my own reading taste. I'm savvier about book descriptions and how literary prizes actually work, and I can be selectively skeptical of buzz and marketing tactics and pitifully hyperbolic book jacket copy without being generally cynical about contemporary literature. If I've fully read even 10 actively bad books a few years from now, I will have been doing it wrong. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you soon for some very different videos that I'm so happy to be making. It lights me up just to think about them. Like I said, all my videos will be different from this one, so I hope you didn't enjoy it too much. And the piano outro is gonna feel pretty incongruous here, huh?